There exists a threshold in human understanding that most will never cross, a veil so thin yet so impenetrable that entire lifetimes pass without even glimpsing what lies beyond it. Imagine for a moment that everything you believe about success, about power, about influence has been nothing more than an elaborate performance staged for your benefit. A theater of illusions designed to keep you trapped in perpetual struggle, while others move through the world with an ease that seems almost supernatural. What if the difference between those who exhaust themselves in endless labor and those who command reality with a mere gesture has nothing to do with effort at all, but rather with a single shift in perception that changes everything? Niccolò Machiavelli, that infamous architect of realpolitik, whose very name became synonymous with cunning, understood something that continues to elude the masses centuries after his death. He saw that human affairs operate according to patterns as predictable as the movements of celestial bodies, that beneath the chaos of political intrigue and social competition exists a hidden architecture of power that only the initiated can perceive. When you finally learn to see this architecture, when your eyes adjust to recognize the invisible scaffolding upon which all human interactions are built, something remarkable happens. The frantic scrambling that once defined your existence simply falls away, replaced by a fluid mastery that appears effortless to those still blind to the game. Consider the fundamental paradox that torments ambitious souls in every generation. They work themselves to exhaustion. They sacrifice everything on the altar of achievement. They push harder and longer than their competitors. Yet somehow the prizes they seek continue to slip through their fingers like water through a sieve. Meanwhile, others seem to glide through obstacles that would crush ordinary mortals, accumulating power and influence with a grace that defies explanation. The conventional wisdom tells us this disparity must be explained by talent, by intelligence, by work ethic, or by luck. Machiavelli would tell you that all of these explanations miss the essential truth. The real difference lies not in what these masters do, but in what they see. The Florentine strategist spent his years observing the mechanics of power from the privileged vantage point of those who wielded it, and later from the bitter perspective of those who lost it. He watched as princes rose and fell, as republics flourished and collapsed, as the ambitious soared to heights of glory only to plummet into oblivion. Through all of this tumult, he detected patterns that repeated with almost mathematical precision. He realized that political and social life operates according to laws as immutable as those governing the physical world. Laws that remain invisible to the untrained eye, but become blazingly obvious once you learn how to look. This knowledge formed the basis of a dark power that separates the rulers from the ruled, the masters from the servants, the architects of destiny from those who merely react to circumstances. What you are about to discover is not a collection of tactics or techniques that require more effort on your part. This is not another exhausting program of self-improvement that demands you transform yourself into someone you are not. Instead, you are about to learn how to adjust your vision, how to calibrate your perception so that you begin to see what has always been there but remained hidden. Once this shift occurs, once you glimpse the true structure of the game being played all around you, your entire relationship with effort, with struggle, with achievement will fundamentally transform. You will discover that the path to power does not require superhuman exertion, but rather the cultivation of a particular kind of sight, a way of reading human nature and social dynamics that renders transparent what others experience as impenetrable mystery. The first revelation that strikes anyone who truly absorbs Machiavelli's teaching is that most human behavior follows scripts written long before any individual was born. People believe themselves to be unique, to be making autonomous choices driven by personal will and individual character. Yet they consistently fall into patterns that have repeated since time immemorial. The prince who trusts too readily, the counselor who speaks truth to power without considering consequences, the rival who telegraphs his intentions through vanity and pride, the ally who abandons ship at the first sign of trouble. Machiavelli catalogued these recurring types with the precision of a naturalist documenting species, understanding that human nature provides the constants around which all variable circumstances revolve. When you begin to recognize these patterns, when you start to see people not as inscrutable individuals, but as predictable expressions of fundamental human tendencies, the game transforms completely. The anxiety that once accompanied every interaction dissipates because you understand the underlying logic governing how people will likely respond. The person sitting across from you in negotiation, the colleague competing for advancement, the potential ally evaluating whether to join forces. They all operate according to principles that Machiavelli spent years distilling. They will prioritize their security above all else. They will respond to demonstrations of strength more reliably than appeals to fairness. They will betray ideals to protect interests. They will follow whoever appears most likely to prevail. This understanding liberates you from the exhausting work of trying to change human nature or appeal to virtues that exist more in imagination than reality. The moralist exhausts himself trying to convince people to behave better, to transcend self-interest, to embrace noble principles regardless of consequences. Machiavelli would call this foolishness of the highest order, a waste of precious energy on impossible aims. Instead, the strategist who sees the game accepts human nature as the fixed constant it is and focuses energy on arranging circumstances to make people's predictable responses work in his favor. This is not more work, but rather more intelligent work. Effort directed with precision, rather than scattered across futile attempts to alter what cannot be altered. The masses remain blind to these patterns because they have been taught to view human behavior through lenses that obscure rather than reveal. Moralistic thinking encourages people to believe that everyone operates from the same ethical framework, that appeals to justice and fairness will sway decisions, that good intentions matter as much as outcomes. Religious thinking promotes the illusion that people are governed by their better angels, that conscience and compassion drive behavior more than fear and self-interest. Romantic thinking insists on the uniqueness of every individual, making it impossible to recognize the recurring types that actually populate social life. All of these frameworks serve certain social purposes, but they prevent perception of the actual machinery governing human affairs. Machiavelli's genius lay in his willingness to strip away these comforting illusions and describe what he actually observed rather than what he wished to see. He recognized that the prince who wants to maintain power cannot afford the luxury of viewing the world through rose-tinted lenses. Reality operates according to its own logic, indifferent to moral preferences or idealistic hopes. The successful strategist must cultivate the ability to see what is rather than what should be, to recognize the actual motivations driving behavior rather than the professed justifications people offer. This unflinching clarity of vision represents the first essential element of dark power, the foundation upon which all strategic advantage is built. Consider how much energy most people waste because they consistently misread the situations they find themselves in. They trust where trust is unwarranted. They reveal vulnerabilities to those who will exploit them. They make assumptions about loyalty and goodwill that reality does not support. Each of these errors stems from faulty perception, from seeing the world through frameworks that distort rather than clarify. The person who has trained themselves to see as Machiavelli saw experiences far fewer of these costly mistakes. They invest trust strategically rather than optimistically. They recognize threats before they materialize. They distinguish between genuine alliance and temporary convenience. This superiority of perception translates directly into superiority of outcomes. The transformation from ordinary vision to strategic vision does not happen instantaneously, but it also does not require decades of study or superhuman insight. What it demands is a willingness to question the comfortable narratives you have been taught about how the world works and to replace them with frameworks based on clear-eyed observation. When you stop expecting people to behave according to ideals and start predicting their behavior based on interests and fears, your accuracy improves dramatically. When you cease being surprised by betrayal and recognize it as a natural feature of certain situations, you can prepare accordingly. When you understand that demonstrations of strength often matter more than actual strength, you can allocate your limited resources with devastating effectiveness. This is the vision that makes the game visible. Once you begin to see the patterns governing individual behavior, the next layer of the game reveals itself. You start to perceive the hidden structures of power that determine who rises and who falls, regardless of merit or effort. Machiavelli understood that societies contain invisible architectures, complex webs of obligation and fear, alliance and enmity, reputation and perception that create the actual playing field on which ambitions succeed or fail. Most people remain oblivious to these structures, believing that individual excellence alone determines outcomes, that working hard and developing skills will inevitably lead to advancement. This represents perhaps the most costly delusion that the ambitious can harbor. The truth that Machiavelli never tired of illustrating is that no individual operates in isolation, that power flows through networks rather than residing in persons, that your position within the structure matters infinitely more than your personal capabilities. The brilliant strategist trapped in the wrong network will accomplish nothing, while the mediocre operator well-positioned within the right structure can reshape kingdoms. This explains the phenomenon that frustrates countless talented individuals, the mystery of why lesser capabilities often achieve greater results. They are asking the wrong question. The relevant inquiry is not who possesses the most skill, but who occupies the most advantageous position within the architecture of power. When you learn to perceive these invisible structures, your entire strategic orientation shifts fundamentally. Instead of focusing obsessively on self-improvement, on making yourself more capable or more knowledgeable or more hard-working, you begin to think architecturally. You ask yourself where the actual levers of power reside in your environment. You identify who holds the crucial positions within the network you must navigate. You map the alliances and enmities that create opportunities and obstacles. You recognize which battles matter and which represent distractions. This architectural thinking enables you to achieve results that would be impossible through individual effort alone, no matter how prodigious. Machiavelli's most famous work, The Prince, functions as a manual for navigating these invisible structures. Every piece of advice he offers assumes that the reader understands the complex ecosystem of competing interests and fears within which the prince must operate. When he counsels that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, he is not making a moral statement, but rather an architectural observation about how power flows through social structures. Fear creates more reliable bonds than affection because fear operates through self-interest, the one motivation you can count on. When he warns against neutrality in conflicts between other powers, he recognizes that fence-sitting represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how political architecture works. The structures will not allow you to remain outside them indefinitely. The contemporary reader might assume that Machiavelli's insights apply only to the world of Renaissance politics, that modern professional and social environments operate according to different principles. This assumption could not be more wrong. The same invisible architectures govern every domain where human beings compete for limited rewards and positions of advantage. Your workplace contains princes and courtiers, allies and enemies, dangerous neutrals and reliable partisans. Your professional network creates the same webs of obligation and opportunity that connected Renaissance city-states. Your reputation functions precisely as Machiavelli described, creating perceptions that become more influential than underlying realities. The game remains the same, only the costumes have changed. The person who sees these structures gains enormous advantage over those who remain blind to them, while others exhaust themselves trying to prove their worth through ever greater displays of capability. The architectural thinker focuses on position, while others complain about unfair outcomes or corrupt systems. The strategist uses understanding of how structures actually work to navigate them effectively, while others wait passively for merit to be recognized. The game-aware player actively shapes the perceptions and relationships that determine how power flows. This is not more effort, but rather effort directed with precision toward the mechanisms that actually produce results. Perhaps most importantly, seeing the architecture allows you to recognize when you are trapped in a structure that cannot yield the outcomes you desire. Many people spend years or even decades struggling within environments where the invisible architecture makes success effectively impossible given their starting position. They believe that more effort, more patience, more loyalty will eventually break through, never recognizing that they are playing a game, the rules of which guarantee their frustration. Machiavelli would tell such people that the wise strategist knows when to abandon a position within one structure and seek better placement within another. This willingness to move strategically between structures rather than pledging undying loyalty to any particular one represents a crucial element of dark power. The third dimension of the game becomes visible when you understand how perception shapes reality more powerfully than facts ever could. Machiavelli grasped what modern strategists often miss, that appearance frequently matters more than substance, that what people believe about you determines your effectiveness more than your actual capabilities. This sounds cynical to ears, trained on platitudes about authenticity and being true to yourself, but Machiavelli never confused what sounds noble with what actually works. He observed again and again that princes who cultivated the right perceptions thrived, while princes who possessed genuine virtue but failed to manage appearances often perished. The gap between reality and perception creates one of the most exploitable features of the social landscape. Most people operate under the assumption that reality will eventually assert itself, that truth will out, that genuine quality will be recognized. Machiavelli would laugh at such naivety. He saw countless examples of inferior realities triumphing because they were wrapped in superior perceptions, just as he witnessed superior realities failing because they were clothed in inferior appearances. The strategist who grasps this disconnect gains access to forms of power unavailable to those who insist on believing that substance alone matters. Consider how much effort people invest in trying to perfect the underlying reality of their capabilities while neglecting the perceptions others form. They assume that working hard in obscurity will somehow be noticed and rewarded, that developing genuine expertise will automatically translate into recognition and advancement. Meanwhile, others who grasp the game allocate their energy very differently. They understand that perceptions must be actively shaped and carefully maintained, that the appearance of capability often opens more doors than actual capability, that being seen as powerful creates power regardless of underlying strength. This is not deception in the conventional sense, but rather sophisticated understanding of how social reality is actually constructed. Machiavelli's advice to princes about appearing merciful, faithful, humane, and religious, while being prepared to act otherwise when necessary, reveals his deep insight into this dimension of power. He is not counseling hypocrisy as a moral failing, but rather strategic management of perception as a practical necessity. The prince who actually embodies these virtues all the time will be destroyed by competitors who selectively deploy them for effect while remaining unbound by them in practice. The prince who lacks these virtues entirely and makes no effort to appear virtuous will alienate necessary supporters. The wise prince cultivates the appearance of virtue while maintaining the freedom to act according to necessity, threading the needle between moral absolutism and obvious villainy. The modern manifestation of this principle appears everywhere once you train yourself to see it. The professional who succeeds often differs from the one who deserves to succeed primarily in their mastery of perception management. They understand that visibility matters as much as performance, that being seen doing important work often counts more than doing important work in obscurity, that symbolic victories can matter more than substantive ones if they shape the perceptions of decision makers. This might offend those who believe in meritocracy as an actual operating principle rather than a comforting myth, but denying reality because it conflicts with preferred beliefs represents the opposite of strategic thinking. The crucial insight is that managing perception does not require less effort than improving reality, but it does require different effort. The person blind to the game pours all energy into the substance while letting perception take care of itself, then wonders why inferior competitors advance instead. The person who sees the game allocates energy strategically between substance and perception, understanding that both must be managed, but that perception often yields faster returns. This is not laziness or cutting corners, but rather intelligent allocation of limited resources based on clear understanding of how advancement actually happens in social structures. Machiavelli's dark power in this domain comes from recognizing that you are always managing perceptions, whether you do so consciously or unconsciously. The question is not whether to engage in this aspect of the game, but rather whether you will do so skillfully or incompetently. Those who refuse to think strategically about perception on the grounds that it feels manipulative or inauthentic do not escape the game. They simply play it badly. Meanwhile, those who embrace this dimension of reality gain the ability to shape how others see them, to cultivate useful reputations, to create perceptions that open doors and multiply opportunities. Over time, this mastery of appearance creates advantages that mere substance can never match. As your vision sharpens further, you begin to perceive the role that timing plays in determining outcomes. Machiavelli understood that the same action taken at different moments produces radically different results, that strategic effectiveness depends as much on when you act as on what you do. The ambitious often fail not because they choose wrong actions, but because they execute right actions at wrong times. They strike before the ground is prepared, or they hesitate when the moment demands boldness, or they persist when circumstances have shifted to make their approach obsolete. This blindness to temporal dynamics causes more failures than any other single factor. The game unfolds in time, which means it constantly shifts and evolves according to forces beyond any individual's control. Machiavelli called these forces fortune, personifying them as a goddess who must be respected and, when possible, seduced through proper timing. He recognized that there exist moments when conditions align to make certain actions suddenly viable, windows of opportunity that open briefly and then close. The strategist who sees the game develops sensitivity to these temporal rhythms, learning to recognize when circumstances favor action and when they demand patience. This temporal intelligence multiplies effectiveness without requiring additional effort, simply by ensuring that whatever effort you do expend occurs at moments when it will be most consequential. Most people approach their ambitions with a kind of temporal naivety that guarantees frustration. They decide what they want and then attempt to will it into existence through sheer determination, treating time as an obstacle to overcome rather than a dimension to navigate intelligently. When circumstances do not favor their goals, they try harder, pushing against resistance that Machiavelli would recognize as fortune, indicating that the moment is not right. When windows of opportunity open, they often fail to recognize them, continuing to execute plans that are no longer relevant to the transformed situation. This blindness to timing means that vast amounts of effort get expended at wrong moments, producing disappointing results despite genuine commitment. Machiavelli's concept of virtue captures the quality that successful princes must cultivate to navigate fortune effectively. Virtue represents something more than virtue in the conventional moral sense. It encompasses boldness, decisiveness, strategic flexibility, and above all, the capacity to recognize when circumstances demand action versus when they demand restraint. The leader possessed of virtue reads the tempo of events with almost musical precision, knowing when to strike and when to wait, when to persist and when to pivot, when to push forward and when to consolidate gains. This temporal intelligence makes all the difference between strategic mastery and merely thrashing about. Consider how the timing-aware strategist approaches a competitive situation differently than someone blind to temporal dynamics. While the naive competitor focuses on constant effort, maintaining the same level of activity regardless of circumstances, the strategic competitor varies intensity and focus according to what the moment demands. When circumstances create opportunity, they concentrate resources and act decisively. When circumstances create obstacles, they conserve energy and prepare for the next opening. When the competitive landscape shifts, they adapt quickly rather than stubbornly persisting with approaches that no longer fit the situation. Over time, this intelligent relationship with timing creates massive advantages that appear mysterious to those who cannot see what is actually happening. The modern environment accelerates the importance of timing even beyond what Machiavelli observed. Opportunities emerge and vanish with greater speed, competitive landscapes shift more rapidly, and the cost of miscalculation grows as environments become more dynamic. The professional who develops sensitivity to these temporal patterns gains enormous advantage. They recognize when their industry is entering a phase that favors innovation versus when it rewards optimization. They see when organizational leadership transitions create windows for advancement. They detect when reputations are vulnerable to challenge or when they have solidified beyond easy disruption. This temporal awareness allows them to achieve results that appear effortless because they are properly timed, riding currents rather than swimming against them. The cultivation of timing sense does not require mystical intuition or supernatural foresight. It demands careful observation of patterns, attention to signals that indicate shifts in circumstances, and willingness to adjust your approach as situations evolve. Machiavelli developed his temporal intelligence through years of watching political events unfold, noting which actors succeeded and which failed, paying attention to the relationship between timing and outcomes. Any person willing to observe their environment with similar care can develop this crucial dimension of strategic sight. The question is whether you remain blind to temporal dynamics, attributing success and failure to factors you can control, or whether you open your eyes to see how profoundly timing shapes every outcome. The fifth layer of the game reveals itself when you understand that power is fundamentally relational rather than absolute. Machiavelli grasped that your strength or weakness exists only in context, that what matters is not your capabilities in isolation, but rather how they compare to those of your competitors and how they are perceived by those whose support you require. This relational understanding transforms strategy from a focus on individual development to a focus on relative positioning. The strategist who sees this dimension stops asking how capable they can become and starts asking how they can maximize their advantages relative to specific competitors within specific contexts. The blindness to relational dynamics causes ambitious people to waste enormous energy pursuing improvements that do not actually change their competitive position. They work to develop skills that their competitors also possess. They accumulate credentials that everyone in their field shares. They demonstrate capabilities that do not differentiate them from alternatives. All of this effort might make them objectively more capable, but it does nothing to improve their position relative to others competing for the same opportunities. Machiavelli would immediately recognize this as strategic confusion, effort expended without consideration for the relational context that determines whether it will matter. Consider the prince trying to maintain power in a competitive landscape. His absolute military strength matters far less than his military strength relative to potential challenges and relative to what allies and subjects perceive as adequate for protecting their interests. A prince with a modest army that exceeds the capabilities of any potential rival enjoys more security than a prince with a massive army that appears insufficient given the threats he faces. The strategic question is never how strong you are in absolute terms, but rather whether you are strong enough relative to the specific challenges you face and whether relevant parties perceive you as strong enough to warrant their support or respect. This relational understanding completely changes how you approach development and positioning. Instead of pursuing generic self-improvement, you analyze your competitive landscape to identify dimensions where you can establish clear differentiation. Instead of trying to match competitors' strength for strength across all dimensions, you focus on achieving superiority in specific areas that matter most given your circumstances. Instead of treating all capabilities as equally valuable, you ruthlessly prioritize those that create the most favorable contrasts with alternatives. This strategic focus allows you to dominate certain dimensions of comparison while accepting inferiority in others that matter less, achieving effective superiority with less total effort than would be required for across-the-board excellence. Machiavelli's advice about alliances and coalitions further illuminates this relational thinking. He recognized that power comes not just from your own capabilities, but from your ability to harness the capabilities of others through strategic relationship. A prince might be individually weak, but effectively strong through well-chosen alliances. Conversely, a prince might possess impressive personal capabilities, but be effectively weak due to isolation or enmity with powerful neighbors. The strategist who sees the game understands that building the right relationships often matters more than building personal capacity. That position within networks of power trumps individual attributes. The contemporary application of this principle appears everywhere in professional and social competition. The person who succeeds often does so not by being the most capable in absolute terms, but by being well-positioned relative to alternatives when decisions get made. They ensure they compare favorably on dimensions that decision-makers care about most. They cultivate relationships that make their capabilities more consequential. They avoid competing on grounds where others have insurmountable advantages, instead shifting competition to terrain where their particular strengths shine. This is not avoidance of competition, but rather intelligent competition, fighting only battles you can win and avoiding those you cannot. The dark power that comes from seeing these relational dynamics is that you stop trying to be good at everything and start being strategically excellent at specific things that create advantage in your actual competitive environment. You stop comparing yourself to some abstract ideal of capability and start comparing yourself to the actual alternatives you need to best. You stop developing yourself in isolation and start positioning yourself within the networks and structures that multiply whatever capabilities you possess. This relational thinking makes all the difference between exhausting yourself in pursuit of impossible perfection and strategically deploying limited capabilities to maximum effect. The game is always relational, and once you see this, everything about how you invest your energy transforms completely. As you continue to develop strategic sight, you begin to perceive perhaps the most important dimension of all: the role that reputation plays in creating or destroying possibility. Machiavelli understood that reputation functions as a kind of social capital that either multiplies or divides the effectiveness of your actual capabilities. A prince with a reputation for strength can often achieve through intimidation what would otherwise require actual military action. A prince with a reputation for keeping faith can form alliances that would be impossible for one known to be treacherous. A prince with a reputation for generosity can inspire loyalty without actually giving away resources that would weaken his position. Reputation creates or closes doors independent of underlying reality. The crucial insight is that reputation operates according to its own logic, somewhat independent from the facts that supposedly gave rise to it. A reputation once established tends to persist beyond the circumstances that created it, and people interpret new information through the lens of existing reputation rather than objectively. This means that early investments in building the right reputation pay dividends far exceeding the initial effort, while damage to reputation creates costs that far exceed the events that caused the damage. Machiavelli saw countless examples of princes whose reputations diverged dramatically from their actual characters and capabilities. Yet their fate depended far more on what people believed than on what was true. The person who understands this dimension of power invests deliberately in reputation from the beginning, recognizing that it will shape every subsequent interaction and opportunity. They understand that certain actions early in a career or relationship carry disproportionate weight in establishing reputation, and they choose these foundational actions strategically. They recognize that defending reputation requires constant vigilance, because a single contradiction of established perception can unravel years of careful cultivation. They grasp that sometimes the strategic move is to sacrifice immediate advantage to maintain reputation, because the long-term costs of damaged reputation exceed the short-term gains from opportunistic behavior. Machiavelli's famous advice about when a prince should keep faith and when he should break it reveals sophisticated understanding of reputation dynamics. He is not saying that princes should be casually treacherous, which would destroy the reputation for reliability necessary to form alliances. Rather, he recognizes that rigid adherence to commitments when circumstances radically change can be suicidal, that the wise prince must occasionally prioritize survival over consistency. But he is careful to note that such necessity should be rare, and that the prince must skillfully manage perceptions when it occurs to minimize damage to reputation. The key is maintaining a reputation for generally keeping faith while preserving freedom to act otherwise when absolutely necessary. The contemporary strategist faces similar dynamics around reputation management. In professional contexts, your reputation determines which opportunities come to you, who wants to work with you, what people assume about your capabilities before you even demonstrate them. Someone with a strong reputation for excellence can sometimes fail spectacularly and still recover quickly because people interpret the failure as an aberration. Someone with a damaged reputation can perform brilliantly and still struggle for recognition because people interpret evidence through the lens of their negative preconceptions. This asymmetry means that managing reputation deserves as much strategic attention as developing actual capabilities. The dark power available to those who see reputation as a dimension of the game is that they can often achieve more with a strong reputation and modest capabilities than they could with strong capabilities and a modest reputation. This is not an argument for pure deception, which eventually collapses under its own contradictions and creates catastrophic reputation damage. Rather, it is recognition that strategic attention to how your actions shape perceptions yields returns that mere focus on doing good work cannot match. The person who delivers excellent results in obscurity gains less than the person who delivers good results with high visibility. The person who handles one crisis with skill and ensures everyone knows about it gains more reputationally than the person who handles 10 crises with equal skill but lets the achievements go unnoticed. Machiavelli would tell you to treat reputation as one of your most precious assets, more valuable than money and in some cases more valuable than actual capabilities. A damaged reputation can make it impossible to exercise power you actually possess. A strong reputation can give you access to power far exceeding your actual capabilities by making others willing to follow, support, or fear you based on perception alone. The strategic question is not whether to care about reputation, which anyone with sense must do, but whether you will manage it consciously and skillfully or leave it to chance, and then wonder why opportunities fail to materialize despite your genuine worth. Once you see reputation as a dimension of the game, you can never unsee it, and your approach to every action transforms to account for its reputational implications. The final dimension of strategic sight that Machiavelli illuminates is perhaps the most subtle yet most powerful. Once you see all the previous layers of the game, you begin to perceive that the ultimate source of power lies not in controlling outcomes, but in shaping the frameworks through which other people interpret and respond to situations. The master strategist does not simply react more skillfully to circumstances than others. They shape the circumstances themselves by influencing how people perceive their options, understand their interests, and define their choices. This represents the highest form of power because it operates almost invisibly, causing people to serve your interests while believing they are serving their own. Machiavelli's deepest insights concern not tactical maneuvers, but rather the architecture of perception and interpretation that determines how people respond to events. When he discusses how princes should appear versus how they should be, when he analyzes how subjects form judgments about whether they are well governed, when he examines how reputations get constructed and modified, he is always pointing toward this deeper level of strategic operation. The prince, who must constantly use force to maintain order, has already failed at the highest level of the game. The successful prince shapes the interpretive frameworks of subjects so thoroughly that they do not even conceive of alternatives to his rule, or they perceive such alternatives as more frightening than the present arrangement. Consider how much power lies in defining the terms through which a situation gets understood. The person who successfully frames a dispute, a competition, or a negotiation has already won the most important battle because they have established the criteria by which success will be judged. If you can determine what questions get asked, what factors get considered relevant, what outcomes get defined as victories or defeats, you have shaped the game itself rather than merely playing it. This represents power of an entirely different order than the power to execute tactics within a game whose rules you did not create and cannot control. The contemporary manifestation of this principle appears in every domain where interpretation and framing matter. The professional who succeeds in defining what counts as good performance in their field gains advantage over those with objectively superior capabilities measured by different standards. The leader who successfully frames organizational challenges in ways that make their particular skills and perspective essential becomes indispensable regardless of whether alternative framings might be equally valid. The strategist who shapes how their competitive landscape gets understood can often determine outcomes before actual competitions even occur, because they have influenced the interpretive frameworks through which performances get evaluated. Machiavelli understood that this highest level of power requires extraordinary subtlety and patience. You cannot obviously impose interpretive frameworks on people who resist them. Instead, you must work indirectly, planting ideas, shaping conversations, influencing the assumptions that underlie how people think about their situations. You must make people believe that the framework serving your interests actually originated with them or reflect natural truths rather than strategic constructions. This is the dark art that separates mere competent strategists from true masters of power. The ability to shape how others think without them recognizing that their thinking has been shaped. The person who reaches this level of strategic sight understands that everything discussed in the previous sections, all the patterns and structures and dynamics of the game, ultimately rest on interpretive frameworks that can themselves be influenced and modified. Human nature provides constraints, but how people understand and express that nature varies dramatically based on the frameworks they adopt for making sense of their experience. Social structures seem fixed and immutable, but they rest on shared interpretations that can be gradually shifted by those who understand how meaning gets constructed and maintained. Reputations appear objective, but they depend entirely on the criteria people use to evaluate behavior and the narratives they tell themselves about what they observe. When you see this deepest layer of the game, when you understand that reality is partly constructed through interpretation, and that interpretation can be strategically influenced, you gain access to forms of power that remain invisible to those operating at more superficial levels. You stop accepting the frameworks within which you find yourself and start asking which frameworks serve your interests and how you might gradually shift interpretations in directions you favor. You recognize that the most important battles occur not over specific outcomes, but over the interpretive schemas that determine what outcomes mean and what responses they trigger. You grasp that the ultimate economy of effort comes from shaping the game itself, rather than simply playing whatever game others have established. This represents Machiavelli's darkest and most profound teaching, the recognition that those who truly wield power are not those who act most forcefully within reality, but those who shape how reality itself gets understood and defined. The transformation that occurs when you finally learn to see the game that Machiavelli described changes everything about how you move through the world. The anxious scrambling that once consumed your energy dissolves because you understand the actual mechanisms governing outcomes rather than flailing against mysteries you cannot comprehend. The exhausting effort to prove your worth gives way to strategic positioning that leverages the structures and patterns you now perceive clearly. The frustration of watching lesser talents advance while your genuine capabilities go unrecognized transforms once you grasp how perception, timing, relationships, and reputation actually determine who rises and who remains trapped, regardless of merit. This is not cynicism, but rather liberation through accurate vision, freedom that comes from seeing clearly rather than stumbling through fog. Machiavelli offers no comfortable illusions, no reassuring platitudes about how the universe rewards virtue and punishes vice, no promises that working hard and playing fair will eventually yield success. Instead, he provides something infinitely more valuable, an unflinching description of how power actually operates, stripped of the consoling myths that keep most people trapped in patterns of futile effort. This is the gift he gives to those brave enough to look directly at reality without the protective filters that make harsh truths more bearable. Once you accept this gift, once you train your eyes to see what has always been there but remained hidden, you step into a different relationship with your own ambitions and the obstacles you face. The essential message threading through everything Machiavelli teaches is that strategic sight matters more than quantity of effort, that understanding the game matters more than intensity of play, that calibration of action to reality matters more than force of will or purity of intention. The person who sees clearly can accomplish with elegant economy what the blind person cannot achieve through superhuman exertion. This is not because the clear-sighted person is more capable in absolute terms, but because they direct their efforts with precision toward the actual mechanisms producing results rather than dissipating energy across approaches that cannot work, given how the game actually operates. Vision multiplies effectiveness in ways that additional effort never could. What remains after everything else falls away is a simple yet profound truth about the nature of power and achievement in human affairs. Those who learn to see the patterns, structures, dynamics, and interpretive frameworks that determine outcomes gain access to a kind of mastery that appears effortless to observers still trapped in conventional blindness. They move through obstacles that stop others, not because they possess superior strength, but because they perceive paths invisible to those around them. They shape circumstances not through overwhelming force, but through subtle influence of the factors that determine how situations unfold. They achieve their aims not through exhausting struggle, but through strategic alignment with the actual mechanics of social reality. This is the dark power Machiavelli illuminates. Dark not because it is evil, but because it operates in dimensions most people never learn to perceive. The question that confronts you now is whether you will continue operating according to the comfortable myths that keep most people trapped in cycles of frustrating effort and disappointing results, or whether you will embrace the harder path of seeing clearly and acting accordingly. Machiavelli offers no shortcuts, no easy answers, no techniques that allow you to avoid the difficult work of training your perception to see what others miss. But he does offer something precious beyond measure: the possibility of genuine strategic effectiveness through clarity of vision. Those who accept his teaching and commit themselves to developing the sight it requires discover that effort becomes not irrelevant, but properly directed, that struggle becomes not endless, but strategic, that achievement becomes not a matter of luck or extraordinary talent, but rather the natural consequence of seeing the game and playing it with eyes wide open. The choice, as always, belongs entirely to you. If this exploration of Machiavellian wisdom has shifted something in your perception, if you find yourself beginning to see patterns you could not detect before, if the frameworks described here resonate with experiences you have had but could not quite articulate, then perhaps this is the beginning of your own journey towards strategic sight. Consider leaving a comment sharing which dimension of the game surprised you most, or which insight struck closest to your own experience. These conversations help all of us sharpen our perception and deepen our understanding. If you believe others in your circle might benefit from examining these uncomfortable truths about how power actually operates, share this exploration with them. And if you want to continue developing your strategic vision through content that challenges conventional thinking and illuminates hidden dimensions of reality, subscribe to this channel and join a community committed to seeing clearly rather than comfortably. The game continues whether you see it or not, but everything changes once your eyes finally open.